Eben Etzebeth is one of the most decorated locks in rugby history, but recently, that reputation took a hit that nobody saw coming. During an international test match, with his team dominating by a record margin, Etzebeth was sent off for what the disciplinary panel would later describe as intentional contact with an opponent's eye. The footage was clear. His thumb made contact with the eye socket of Wales flanker Alex Mann, and the pressure was applied for approximately 1 second. The panel's report noted that Etzebeth continued pushing downward with a grimacing expression. This wasn't a split-second accident in the heat of a ruck. This was deliberate. The rugby world erupted. Eye gouging sits at the very top of rugby's list of unforgivable acts. It's not just dangerous, it threatens a player's ability to see, to work, to live normally after their career ends. World Rugby has historically come down hard on these incidents, because the sport simply cannot tolerate them. When the disciplinary hearing concluded, Etzebeth received a 12-week suspension. He would miss crucial matches for both his club and potentially his country. The Sharks immediately deregistered him from their European campaign. His absence would be felt across the rugby calendar. But 12 weeks, for an intentional act, the entry point for contact with the eye area, according to World Rugby's framework, starts at 18 weeks. Etzebeth's ban was reduced by 6 weeks due to mitigating factors. His clean disciplinary record across 141 test appearances played a role. His conduct during the hearing was noted as cooperative, but even with those considerations, something felt off to many observers. In 2010, French prop David Atoub received 70 weeks for eye gouging, though he was a repeat offender with a previous incident on his record. Still, the comparison was stark. The disciplinary panel themselves acknowledged that the standard 50% reduction for mitigation was perhaps too generous in cases like this. They expressed concern about the framework, but applied it anyway. So there was Etzebeth, facing 3 months out of the game, while the precedent suggested much harsher punishment was possible. The inconsistency raised eyebrows. The detail that shifted everything came buried in the official disciplinary report. Ardie, captain of the New Zealand All Blacks, had provided a character testimonial for Eben Etzebeth. Let that sink in for a moment. The leader of South Africa's greatest rival, the team they've battled in some of the most intense matches in rugby history, stepped forward to speak on behalf of a Springbok facing serious disciplinary action. This wasn't just unusual. This was unprecedented. The All Blacks and Springboks don't just compete. They define each other. Their matches are treated like wars without weapons. The respect between these nations runs deep. But so does the competitive fire. Every encounter between them carries weight that goes beyond points on a scoreboard. And yet here was Savea taking time to provide testimony that the disciplinary panel confirmed they considered in reaching their verdict. The content of what Savea said remains private. The panel didn't release the details of his statement, and neither Savea nor Etzebeth have spoken publicly about it since. But the fact that it happened at all raised questions that go far beyond this single incident. What could an All Blacks captain say that would carry weight in a disciplinary hearing for a Springbok? Was he speaking to Etzebeth's character off the field? Was he providing context about the nature of modern forward play and the intensity that exists at the highest level? Did he speak about his own experiences with Etzebeth in matches or in professional settings outside of competition? We don't know. What we do know is that the panel acknowledged his input, and that Etzebeth's suspension ended up at the lower end of what it could have been. The connection between these two facts is impossible to ignore. Some see this as a beautiful example of rugby's values transcending national boundaries. The sport has always prided itself on mutual respect, on players who try to hurt each other for 80 minutes then share a beer afterward. From that perspective, Savea's willingness to speak up for someone he's battled against shows the kind of character that rugby claims to build. Others see it differently. They question whether testimony from a rival should carry weight in a disciplinary process. They wonder if the brotherhood of elite players creates a system where serious offenses get softened because everyone at that level understands each other too well. They ask whether Etzebeth would have received the same consideration without that intervention. The disciplinary panel themselves seemed aware of how this would be received. Their report mentioned Savea's testimony but didn't elaborate on how much weight it carried in their final decision. They noted the reduction from 18 to 12 weeks was based on multiple factors, with his clean record being the primary consideration.
When you consider historical precedents, like the 70-week ban handed down in 2010, the questions become unavoidable. That case also involved deliberate contact with the eye area, and was deemed intentional. The difference was that the player in question had a previous offense on his record, which explained part of the severity, but even accounting for that distinction, the gap between outcomes remains substantial. The standard explanation is that each case must be judged on its specific circumstances. The duration of contact, the force applied, the context of the incident, the injury caused, all of these factors supposedly feed into the decision. But when the variation between punishments is this wide, people stop trusting that the system is working fairly. They start to suspect that other variables are creeping in. Things like profile, nationality, or who's willing to speak on your behalf. Etzebeth's case also raises questions about how clean records should influence punishment for the most serious offenses. There's logic to the idea that someone who has never transgressed deserves more leniency than a repeat offender. That's how most justice systems work, sporting or otherwise. But when the offense is intentional contact with someone's eye, does a previously clean slate really matter that much? The act itself doesn't become less dangerous, because the person doing it has never been caught doing it before. The potential consequences for the victim don't change based on the perpetrator's history. Some argue that at this level of severity, the nature of the offense should determine the punishment almost entirely. The mitigating factors that might reduce a ban for a high tackle, or a dangerous cleanout shouldn't apply the same way. When someone deliberately targets an opponent's ability to see, then there's the context of when this incident occurred. South Africa were winning by 73 points to 0. When Etzebeth made contact with Mann's eye, the match was effectively over. Whatever intensity or competitive fire might be offered as context for physical play, simply doesn't apply when the outcome is already decided. This detail makes the intentional nature of the act even harder to justify or explain away. It wasn't a moment of desperation to stop a try. It wasn't a crucial breakdown in a tight match. It was something else entirely, and that something is what makes people uncomfortable.
The Etzebeth case matters beyond one player's suspension because it exposes fundamental tensions in how rugby handles its most serious disciplinary issues. On one side, there's the sport's image of itself as a game built on respect, honor, and values that transcend the battle on the field. The idea that Ardie Savea would speak for a Springbok fits perfectly into that version of rugby. It suggests a brotherhood that exists at the elite level, a recognition that these players share something beyond their national jerseys. It's the kind of story that reinforces what makes rugby different from other professional sports. On the other side, there's the practical reality that rugby is becoming more commercial, more physical, and more demanding every year. The margins between winning and losing at the international level are razor thin. Players are bigger, faster, and stronger than ever before. The collisions are more intense. The stakes are higher. In that environment, the rules about what's acceptable and what crosses the line become critically important. When those rules appear to be applied inconsistently, it undermines trust in the system. Players, coaches, and everyone watching need to believe that the standards are the same regardless of who you are or who's willing to vouch for you. The 12-week ban will be served. Etzebeth will return to playing. The rugby calendar will move forward, but the questions this case raised aren't going away. How should rugby balance a player's history against the severity of a single intentional act? Should testimony from respected opponents carry weight in disciplinary hearings? And if so, how much? What message does the variation in historical punishment send about consistency in the sport's judicial process? These aren't easy questions, and there probably aren't simple answers. Different people will draw different conclusions based on what they value most. Some will focus on the fact that Etzebeth has spent over a decade playing at the highest level without a similar incident. Others will focus on the 1 second of footage where his thumb pressed into another player's eye socket while his team was winning by 73 points. Both perspectives have merit. What's undeniable is that rugby's disciplinary framework is being tested by cases like this, and the sport needs to figure out whether the current system is producing outcomes that people can accept as fair. Because right now, looking at Eben Etzebeth's 12-week suspension and everything that surrounded it, a lot of people aren't so sure. The game moves on, but the debate about how we protect players and punish those who cross the line remains as intense as ever.